The member from Manchester, Representative Victoria Sullivan, to speak in favor of the override.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and fellow representatives. The intention of House Bill 332 is to allow parents notification of certain subject material, specifically material relating to human sexuality, prior to its teaching. This would allow parents the opportunity to open the conversation prior to the lesson and then follow up with their children after the fact, when they could have questions. It amends RSA 18611, which currently allows parents the opportunity to opt their children out of what they may consider to be objectionable course material, but does not require any parental notification of such materials. This will simply correct that weakness in the law and provide parents an opportunity to work with schools to engage parents. Somewhere between the time this bill passed in this House and it made it to the governor's desk, the intention and very origin of this bill were replaced by a fictional course of events. For the record, this bill originated from a personal experience. I first realized there was a need for this bill in the spring of 2014 when my son watched a video in health class that was titled Assertive Speech. I did not realize that that lesson would include a video which depicted an uncle molesting his nephew. The video was inappropriate for 8-year-olds. It was too descriptive. The conversation between the uncle and his nephew was disturbing. What was most alarming to me was that the child, in the end, confronted the uncle by himself. That is not ever a message I would want sent to my children. How many other children saw this video and now think that that is the way to handle this situation? How many parents have no idea that their children have seen videos like this that could be confusing or simply deliver dangerous advice? If this bill had been in place, I would have received proper notification and opted my child out of that particular lesson. The subject matter is important, but how we deliver it is even more so. Since most of us in this room have been out of school for a few years, I feel it necessary to state that this is not your old-fashioned birds and the bees biology-based health class or sex ed, especially once a child reaches middle school. When I introduced this bill, parents in New Hampshire came out of the woodwork sharing their stories with me. In many cases, the biology-based class has been replaced with a how-to class. One parent in Exeter told me that her daughter came home very upset as she had just learned about how to perform certain sexual acts in health class and was forced to discuss them in a co-ed classroom. I assure you that this was far beyond intercourse and got into subject areas that this 13-year-old and her classmates were not yet ready to learn. She emailed me regarding her daughter's experience, and she stated, quote, "My daughter lost something that day. I believe that she did. And I believe that because I saw that loss in my own son's eyes after his experience." It's not up to the schools to decide when a child loses his or her innocence. In fact, it is up to the parents to protect their innocence for as long as possible. These are not isolated cases. This is occurring all over the country. This statement can easily be verified by a quick Google search. It seems that when it comes to sex ed, there is a policy of it is better to ask forgiveness than permission. However, asking forgiveness does not undo the harm that has been done to our children. We, the parents, know our children. We decide the milestones for them and what times we think they are ready to be introduced to sensitive subject matter. We make decisions for them every day based on the information at hand. We decide what information is appropriate, what movies, what video games are acceptable based on their age and developmental stage. Why then would our voices be removed from decisions made on what material is put in front of them once they simply walk through the doors of their school? In the governor's veto message, she stated, "This bill aims to put in place additional barriers for New Hampshire students who decide to access education about sexual health." Yes. On this point, I agree with the governor. Only I do not call them barriers. I call them parental protections. Once again, the government suggests that parents are incapable of making educated and appropriate decisions for their children. Once again, the government arrogantly tells parents that they are neither worthy nor capable of raising their own children. Once again, the governor also stated that this bill would place an overly burdensome notification requirement on the schools. Again, We are stating that we want parental involvement, and yet requesting a 2-week notification period is considered overly burdensome. Since I am sure that homework for such assignments are prepared well in advance, I disagree with the governor's assessment and put faith in our teachers to be able to comply with this simple request. The intention of this bill was simply to support existing law that allows parents to opt their children out of objectionable course material by allowing parents the opportunity to view that subject matter that is arguably considered the most sensitive. Arguments that this will somehow do away with Shakespeare or Twain in our public schools is not only absurd, it's insulting to parents. In fact, during the committee hearing, it was stated repeatedly that many thought that this was existing policy in most school districts. If that's the case, compliance should be effortless for most school districts and will add a level of protection to the districts that have not yet adopted such a policy. This will alleviate the public outcry that we often see when parents are blindsided that their children were exposed to subject matter that they were not aware of. This will place the onus on the parents, as the schools will provide complete transparency. We often hear schools saying they want more parental involvement. And then a bill like this comes along, which helps include parents in the conversation, and then the conversation sharply turns to, how dare parents interfere with the decisions of the public schools? Parents are their children's first teachers, and God willing, they are their last. The topics that would be covered by this bill are important. They're important issues to discuss with our children. Prior notification simply opens the doors of communication and allows parents to be a part of that conversation, whether resulting in supporting the education they are receiving at school or choosing to provide that education within the home. I firmly believe that parents are more capable of guiding their children's education. More importantly, the Constitution secures their rights to do so. Overriding the governor's veto of hb332 states clearly that members of this House support those parental rights. Mr. Speaker, I am very glad that this will be a roll call vote. Thank you.
Yield to a question. Member yields. Representative Cordella, you may inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Sullivan. I yesterday received an email from Planned Parenthood in relation to this bill, and they said that this would be a step backward in providing vital information to students. I take it you would disagree?
I would completely disagree, and I too received that email that surprised me at 5 o'clock last night. I believe that this is just opening the conversation for parents to be able to sit down with their children and be a part of the conversation that they're having at the school. It in no way eliminates any information that they would be obtaining. Thank you.
The question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall House Bill 332 become law? The state constitution requires a roll call. A 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. Members will take their seats. This will be a roll call vote. Please remember to turn on your voting stations. Chair recognizes Representative Shurtleff for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this bill would place inflexible notice requirements on curriculum that could impede New Hampshire's learning environment, and if I know that the requirements contained in this bill could affect curricula from science to the study of literature, and Mr. Speaker, if I know that the current law already addresses parental objections to course material and health education, would I now push the red button to sustain the governor's veto? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question before the House is notwithstanding the governor's veto. Shall House Bill 332 become law? If you are in favor, you will press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Chair recognizes Representative Bohm for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this bill has absolutely nothing to do with limiting students' academic access to literature or science. And Mr. Speaker, if I know that this bill just further clarifies existing law, giving parents control of when they want their child to have access to sexual material. And Mr. Speaker, if I know it is the parents' job to decide if and when their child is ready for such material, and their job to protect their child from any trauma that may be caused by forcing explicit sexual material on them, especially the very young in elementary school. And Mr. Speaker, if I know that once a child's innocence is lost, it cannot be returned, would you now join me and press the green button to give back parental rights? Thank you.
The question before the House is notwithstanding